Hello everyone, welcome to the class. In this session, in these next two videos, we are going to discuss Huawei's implementation of SSL VPN technology and its applications. As you might be knowing that SSL stands for Secure Socket Layer, and SSL VPNs are a specific type of VPNs where the user can access the intranet and access the resources available within the intranet without having to install a specific client software. They can also access the intranet using a client software and SSL VPN. However, they are not required to do that. And in most of the situations, they can simply use their browser and use HTTPS as the protocol to access the resources available within the network infrastructure or within the intranet, and by using secure communication through SSL. Let's take a look at the SSL technology. So we'll be looking at the technical principles or the basic principles of SSL, and then different application scenarios related to VPN, SSL VPNs, then its configuration and deployment, and finally we'll take a brief look at the troubleshooting scenarios of SSL VPN. In fact, we'll take a look at one of the troubleshooting scenarios, and the other troubleshooting scenarios you can see or you can practice on your own. First of all, let's take a look at the technical basis or technical concepts of SSL VPNs. So, as you can see in this slide, in this picture, that SSL VPN is generally used to access the resources that are available within the enterprise intranet. Those could be the resources available through web servers, through FTP servers, or through email servers. Here is a firewall, USG firewall from Huawei, which is being used as the SSL gateway, and a remote user is accessing these resources by establishing a secure SSL VPN tunnel with the firewall or with the VPN gateway, whatever name you want to give it. So this firewall is acting as the SSL VPN gateway, and the client is establishing a VPN channel with this gateway. And once this channel or this tunnel has been established, then the user can securely communicate through this gateway device with these servers, or we can say that these resources that are available on the server are presented to the user, and the user can access those resources and avail or get all the information that the user wants, and the user has been allowed to access. So this is the basic concept of how SSL VPN communicates, or how SSL VPN is used to provide services to the remote users. The different concepts related to this is that, first of all, the user needs to establish an SSL connection with the gateway device. Once that connection has been established in the first step or in the first phase, then we need to do user authentication, where the username and password, or if we are doing the two-factor authentication, or involving the certificate as well. So the user is authenticated. There are different ways of authenticating the user. We'll look at these different options later. And the user is authenticated. Then once the authentication is done, then we have to assign the authorized resources that are available to the user. So we need to do user authorization. Then the user or the role authorization is done, and the user is assigned, or user is provided access to different types of resources. And those resources can be either web resources or file resources or TCP or IP resources, any of the resources. We'll take a look at these different types of services or resources that can be provided to the user. We'll look at them in a little more detail later on in this session or during these videos. So, when the user is accessing these resources, or when the user is trying to access these resources using SSL VPN, we can say that there are different phases, or there are different steps that are involved during this process. So we can divide the entire process into 3 steps or into 3 phases, we can say. We also call them the 3 elements of SSL VPN. So first one is the handshake protocol, the second one is the record protocol, and the third one is the alert protocol. Basically, what handshake protocol or what handshake phase means is that the user needs to establish an SSL connection or an SSL tunnel with the gateway device, and then they need to agree upon the parameters according to which, or the authorizations according to which, the user can access the intranet resources. Then in the second phase, or the record protocol phase, The normal communication happens where the user is actually accessing those resources, and normal secure communication is being done between the client and the resources or the servers, internet servers, using the SSL VPN gateway. And the third phase or the third element is the alert protocol, which means that this is going to kick in whenever there is an issue, whenever there is an error or there is a problem in the connection. Then the alert protocol is used for exchanging the messages or alerting the client as well as the server about the issues that have occurred in the connection, so that we can troubleshoot our communication. The process of the handshake process, or the process of establishing the connection between the client and the server, consists of exchanging a number of messages between the client and the server. By the server here we mean the gateway, the SSL VPN gateway, most probably the USG firewall, Huawei firewall in this case, or it can be a dedicated SSL VPN gateway device as well, the SVN server device or the SVN gateway device, which Huawei SVN 5800, Huawei's dedicated SSL VPN gateway device, but generally it can be a firewall as well. So the client and server are going to exchange hello messages. The client will send a hello, the server will respond, and the server will also provide its certificate, which means that this certificate is going to be, the local certificate is going to be used by the client to authenticate the server. Then optionally we can also have the client being authenticated by the server. The server can also authenticate the client, which means that the client will send its own certificate and the server can also authenticate the client. This is generally done if we are trying to do two-factor authentication, or we are trying to do an anonymous certificate authentication on the server side. And then the client and the server are going to agree upon the various specifications for traffic encryption and authentication. Once that is done, then finally the handshake phase is over, and the communication can move on to the record phase, which is the normal or regular communication between the client and the gateway for accessing the resources which are present behind the gateway device in the form of web server or FTP or mail server, etc. So these are the steps which are involved, or the messages which are going to be exchanged between the client and the gateway device before an SSL VPN connection can be established. Once this connection has been established and all these steps have been followed, then the secure communication will start. However, if we want to later on establish another connection between the same client and between the same gateway device, we can also make use of session recovery process. This means that during the initial handshake, as we saw in the previous slide, during the initial handshake protocol message exchanges between the server and between the gateway and the client, we can have a session ID. The gateway server can send a session ID to the client, which can be used for session recovery, which means that during the next phases, whenever there is whenever a new session needs to be established between the client and the server, we do not need to go through the entire process, the entire handshake process which you saw in the last slide, and the server and the client can use the session ID previously exchanged between the two, and they can immediately start communicating, or they can immediately establish a secure tunnel and start exchanging the traffic or enter the record phase using secure communication. So this saves a lot of message exchanges or a lot of steps of the handshake protocol phase, and the traffic or the communication can directly start between the client and the gateway without having to go through all those steps. This is what we call the session recovery. In the next video, we are going to take a look at the different authentication steps and the authorization steps that take place, that happen during the handshake protocol, and we'll see in detail how this communication takes place and what is happening behind the scenes on the client side or on the server or the gateway side to make the SSL VPN connection possible. So see you in the next video.